I spent the night with four men after a party my husband found out, and then my name is Lisa, 33 female, and have been married to James, 28 male, for the last 3 years. I chose to marry James because he was younger and I could control him. I am a perfectionist and I like having control over everything that happens around me. I knew that James was someone whom I could tame. I guess that was the main reason why I married him. I never knew that James would have the spine to stand up against me and do something very unexpected that would ruin my life. I spent the night with my bosses after a party, and when I came home, what I witnessed was not like James at all. I met James when he joined my team as a subordinate. He was young, handsome, ambitious, and street smart. I instantly liked him as I always wanted someone like him for my team. As we started working together, things got very physically awkward. I didn't really want to have an affair or date any of my co-workers as it always leads to something bad. After working for 6 months together, I knew that my feelings for James were more than a fling but less than a commitment. I called him home one day to test him out. By the looks on his face, I could tell that he also wanted something more than just a hookup. He started coming home often and we were dating but not officially together. I knew the way my bosses treated me and I didn't want the same stupid shit to happen at home as well. James was my perfect bet if I wanted to be treated right at home. He was my subordinate and was used to taking orders from me and could just reciprocate it at home as well. Yes, I was attracted to him, but attraction and love does not last forever. I proposed to him and asked him to marry me just after dating for a month. Of course, he was over the moon, and within the next 2 months, we were happily married. Things were going great between us for the first year of being married. James was exactly like I expected him to be. He was loyal, agreed to any point I made, and believed in my decision-making. However, as time went on, I started noticing subtle changes in James's behavior. He became more distant and seemed less interested in our conversations. Additionally, he began questioning my decisions and expressing his own opinions more frequently. I already had 4 bosses sitting over my head asking me to get things done. I did not want another male person at home questioning my choices and asking me to do things. I needed someone who would support me unconditionally and trust my judgment without hesitation. James's newfound behavior was causing tension and making me feel overwhelmed with conflicting opinions. I realized that I needed to address this issue with him before it further strained our relationship and affected our ability to communicate effectively. I made him sit one day and asked him what was causing him to question everything that I did around the house. He said that he noticed that a few things could be done more efficiently if done in a different manner. Living in the same house gives him the right to give his opinions about what can be changed to make things work more efficiently. I was losing my patience, so I snapped at him and told him that it was my house, and I decided how things function around here. I could see the disappointment in his eyes as he realized that his suggestions were not being taken into consideration. I realized that I had been too quick to dismiss his perspective and decided to have a more open conversation about finding a balance between our preferences and creating a more efficient household together. I told him that I was really sorry for my outburst. I was in a lot of stress lately due to the upcoming client meeting and was not thinking straight. That was not true at all. I needed a puppet, and now that the puppet had started talking and giving opinions which I was not liking even a single bit, I knew that for now, I just had to let him do things his way, and I would deal with it later. Just like every Christmas, even this year we had an employee party where everyone was invited. I knew that I had to charm my bosses to make sure I get a decent appraisal in the new year. I knew that all the 4 men I worked for liked staring at my assets, so I made sure I gave them enough room to stare at me. Me and James entered the party as a couple. We were having fun and getting drunk. After all, it was a party. I made sure to keep my eyes on my target because I knew everybody in the corporation had some hidden agenda. It was almost midnight when everyone started leaving. As me and James were deciding to leave, one of my bosses walked over towards us and asked me to join them. He told James that it was a management get-together, so unfortunately I was the only one who was allowed. James did look dejected, but there was nothing any of us could do. I gave him a goodbye kiss and told him that I would be home soon. James left the party and I was stuck with my bosses, who I knew would just be ogling at me the entire time. Feeling uneasy, I reluctantly followed my boss to the management get-together. As we entered the event, I couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation knowing that James was not able to join me. Despite my reservations, I put on a smile and prepared myself for an evening of uncomfortable attention from my bosses. I took a seat at the extreme corner of the room so that it was easier for me to leave once this so-called get-together was done. All 4 of my bosses insisted that we drink and celebrate Christmas as a team. They started pouring me drinks and asking me to down it in one shot. I was almost drunk and could hardly stand on my feet. I did not realize when they had swapped places and I was in the center of all of them. It was a private room, so there was no way someone else could get in and disturb us. One of my bosses started narrating the story of how I practically seduced him to get my first promotion. He always knew that I was ambitious and used it to his benefit. He asked me to give him a blowjob if I wanted to be promoted, or else he would make sure that I never get promoted and be stuck at the same role. I had no other choice but to agree to his demands if I wanted to progress in my career. The other boss said that he did not take enough advantage of me the way he did. He had asked me to sleep with him if I wanted to run a team of my own. He thought that since I was going to be married in a week, I would not be accepting his offer. But to his surprise, I did. Until date, he still remembers how I made him feel. I did not understand why they were all talking about my past behavior because this was a Christmas party and nothing more. I was not due for a promotion at least for one more year, so there was really no point talking about how I got my promotions. I slowly felt hands on my thighs and my shoulders, but I was too drunk to react. After a point, all of them were all over my body and I did not resist. I was actually enjoying the attention that I was getting and the control I had on all my bosses. All of us were having a really great time. It was almost 6 in the morning when I woke up. I could see all my bosses sleeping around me wherever they found some space. I quickly gathered my clothes and dressed myself. I drove home only to find James to be awake and waiting for me. I did not like the questioning look that he had on his face. I was still hungover and all I wanted was to just sleep. As I started walking inside, James pulled me and asked me where I had been the entire night. I told him I was exactly where he left me. I was with my bosses, we got drunk and then passed out. I woke up in the morning and came home. Obviously, he did not need to know the entire story. What I do to win favors from my bosses was entirely my decision, and I decide who I would share that with. He screamed at me and asked me to tell him exactly what I was doing the entire night with my bosses. I did not like his tone, so I started telling him the truth. The fact that I earned more than him made it easier for me to put a leash on him and make him do what I wanted. I always had the upper hand in this relationship, and I didn't want to lose that. This was the only reason for me not to leave him. I like being dominant, and I should always have the last word in any matter. Thus, it gave him no right to raise his voice against me or my actions. He looked disappointed and sad. I felt really relieved to be telling him the truth after such a long time. He grabbed my hand and pulled my purse. He took out his phone and started playing the recording on speaker. He could hear the entire conversation where one of my bosses said that he still would get wet dreams about me giving him a blowjob, though it has been a few years since I had done that. Of course, it was embarrassing for James to know about it. I could not believe that he actually recorded a private conversation. He was furious that I slept with my boss 1 week before our wedding. He did not care about the blowjob since that was a long time ago, and we were not even dating then. What hurt him most was that I did not hesitate to sleep with my boss for a promotion just a few days before getting married. I told him that if he had the chance, he would have done the same. He told me that he would never cross the line if he knew it would hurt someone he loved. It was all crap. Everybody does it when they are in a situation where they know that they might get some advantage. He told me that he could not live with such a person who does not even feel guilty about cheating on their partner. I told him I never did anything wrong. I only did those things to progress, and it's not like I had an affair with any of my bosses. It was a give and take and was a one-time thing. He slapped me so hard that I fell on the ground. He packed his things and left. I never expected him to turn around on me like that. I knew that even if I did something which did go overboard, I knew that he would not be complaining about it. I think I was too overconfident about my leash on him. How could he suddenly become a person with spine and morals? I married him because he was ambitious and street smart. How could he even think that I did all of that out of my own will? It was just a transaction between me and my boss to get what we both wanted. How could he get his personal feelings between any of this? I'm writing this post in disbelief that James could not understand a simple thing about corporate. It is always a give and take, and everything is just a transaction. I would request anyone who has been in a similar situation or is going through a similar situation to help me find a solution to this. I know I may not be the perfect wife, but I do want James in my life. He makes my life easier and a little less complicated. I am not here for people to judge me for my actions because I know that anyone who has an ambition to grow would do exactly what I did. So please, people out there, I need your help in getting my life together. Thank you so much for reading my story. I'm just hoping that everybody out here is mature enough to not slander and focus only on giving advice. Thank you all. Update. Thank you everyone for the overwhelming responses. I'm very glad that there are people who are true to themselves and can accept that when given an opportunity, they would do exactly the same thing that I did. This is to keep you all updated on the events that happened after James left home. It didn't hurt me so much that James left home and was staying at a friend's place. What he did next was something I wasn't expecting. He took a few days off and came to the office on the day when I had a very important meeting with the client. He was on my team, so there was no way I could have kicked him out of the meeting. I thought he would be professional and not get personal matters into all of this. When it was time for the presentation, he played that recording where I'm pretty drunk and my bosses are cheering me on to give them handjobs and blowjobs. He was humiliating me not only in front of my colleagues, but also a client who I needed very badly. Obviously, the deal didn't go through as expected. My bosses were furious about me leaking confidential and private conversations. I tried to explain to them that I had no idea that the conversation was being recorded, and I had nothing to do with any of it. I told them to be very logical and practical about it. Why would I want my husband to know what I do with my bosses and how I get my appraisals and promotions? They could not help because they have been humiliated in front of a client who could take very strict action against them. They only had one choice, that was to let me go, so that they could pin all the blame on me and steer their hands clear of everything. Of course, I was furious, but I knew that there was nothing much I could do. They would do anything to save their asses, and I did not have much power to protect myself. I had recently taken a loan for a new house. I had no idea how to come up with the mortgage for the house and all the other expenses that are required every month. I had no job and no way to come up with money for the other expenses. I would have to cut down on a lot of my luxuries to sail through till I get a new job. I was more frustrated by the fact that James was still working there. He was the one who leaked the conversations. He was the one who started all this mess, so how come he was still employed with them, and I was the one who got fired? I guess all men are the same. They found a vulnerable woman and put all the blame on her. Maybe James already got a deal with them, and that was the reason why he was still working with them. I never knew James to be that smart. I tried applying for jobs at other companies. With the amount of experience and caliber that I carried, I knew that it would not be difficult for me to find another job within a month. To my surprise, I was being rejected for weird and silly reasons. I got to know from one of my colleagues that I had been listed as a potential sexual manipulator, and most of the companies were given warnings to be aware of hiring me. I found it to be quite absurd that the same men who were willing to cheat on their wives to give someone a promotion would be so high on ethics. I was clueless on what to do going forward, as my job was the only passion I lived for. I knew that I would go crazy if I did not have a job. Apart from the mortgage, bills, and expenses, I needed my job to function. After applying to almost 10 more companies, I was losing hope in getting a job. I was just scrolling through my phone as I had nothing interesting going on in my life. I suddenly came across a post from James which was captioned, "I guess this is what being a manager feels like." I was stunned to read it. It was just 4 years that James had joined the company. How could he be promoted to being a manager and skip 3 more levels in between? He was not even very good at his job. It took me a bloody 8 years to become a manager, and that too after sucking up to my bosses and doing a lot of things that were not in the book. I was pissed, angry, and mad. Just because he had something against the management, he was able to milk as much as he could from the situation. He used his street smart skills to progress in his career, which was not a bad move. I was hating the fact that he was only able to get a promotion because of me. If I was more aware and covered my tracks, he would never have become a manager. How could he become a manager when I was jobless and not getting jobs anywhere because of him? I thought that there was no point in getting angry about things which were not in my control. I knew what I had to do to get my life back on track. The next day, I waited for James after work to talk to him. He was startled to see me, as he wasn't expecting me to ever see his face after what he had done to me. I told him I was here because I missed him, and I wanted to talk to him, hoping for him to buy it. He was my husband and he was a manager now, so he was my best shot at getting out of this mess. Of course, he seems to be the only one who could undo his actions and make sure I get a decent job. I told him how much he meant to me, and also I did not realize that my actions would hurt him so deeply. I was willing to do anything and tell an insane amount of lies just to make him believe that I care about our relationship and wanted to mend things with him. He was moved by my words and told me that he had been waiting for a heartfelt apology from me to forget everything and start over. He also told me that he was made manager just because all my bosses wanted to get even with me. He said that he could make everything all right. He asked me to meet him tomorrow in front of the office, and he would take me inside and show all the people that have humiliated me that I was back. I was delighted to know that James still followed my instructions. I was glad that I still had it in me to make sure to control all the men around me. I was well before the decided time because I was very excited to come back to work after a long break. When James arrived, I hugged him with enthusiasm and we both walked together in the office. He took me to the meeting room where everybody from all the departments were gathered. He said that he had something important to announce, and I couldn't wait to see the faces of all my bosses who, without a shred of shame, had fired me. James told that there was someone special joining the meeting today, and I was grinning with happiness. He started my praise by telling that I had been one of the most dedicated and hardworking person in this company. He told everybody the story of how when he met me, he was so blown away by my charisma that he wanted to become a manager like me. He also added that he was over the moon when I decided to propose to him for us to get married. Only after marrying me was when he got to know my true colors. He understood that I was a lying and manipulating bitch who could not tolerate anyone else giving orders. He added that I had ruined 3 years of his life by making him follow every damn instruction given by me. I told him to stop and that it was enough. He continued that I was so shameless to come back and talk to him without a decent apology or a shred of guilt asking him to get back together. I started screaming at him to stop talking, and he also asked everyone around him to remember this face and to stay away. This was too much of a humiliation. I stormed off from there and went home. It was okay if he didn't want to get back together with me, he could have just told me. I don't understand the point of this unnecessary humiliation. I understand that he was hurt by my actions and wanted an apology. He could have told me so instead of dragging it for so long. I could have obliged and apologized to him. To anybody still reading this, I would like to say that I understand that I had made mistakes in my marriage. I did not let James have a say in most of the things in and around the house. There is also the fact that I crossed the line when we were dating to get a promotion. I did all of this because I believed that I wasn't doing anything wrong. The more I introspect, the more I realize that I took my relationship too lightly. I should have been more serious about protecting my marriage and setting clear boundaries between work and personal life. James was the best person I had met who treated me with respect and admiration, and I blew it up. I will continue to persuade him till the time he accepts my sincere apology and decides to get back together with me. Spending a lot of time alone at home doing nothing but just introspecting myself has made me realize that I had been living my life completely wrong. I'm going to start valuing my personal connections and relationships more than work. I'm still in search of work, but not really obsessed with how high a position or a bigger company is. I just want to be able to work and be happy with the work I'm doing. To all the career-oriented people out there, I would like to say, please try to maintain a balance between your work and your personal life. Thank you all so much for being kind and being a part of this journey.
You know, I am sharing this story because I can't forget about it, and it keeps coming back. I love my husband so much, and I hold him in very high regards. But you know, sometimes having a male friend can sometimes bring some uncertainty and trust issues in a relationship. I am also not a saint. I have my fair share of flaws, and I have done my husband wrong. I mean, we should have sat down as adults and discussed everything and not act irrational like he did at first. I need advice, what I should do in this situation. How do I deal with this? And please give me tips for future purposes so I won't repeat the same mistake again. My husband, male 26, and I, female 25, met on social media, well, on Facebook to be specific. Well, he had sent me a friend request one day, and usually I do not accept friend requests from people I do not know. But that day, as I was scrolling through my phone, all bored and cooped up in the house, I found myself accepting his request. Well, not before I checked his account, and if he was a catfish or a real person, after I had confirmed that I accepted his request. Within any minutes, the guy sent me an inbox message on Facebook Messenger. So as we were chatting, he complimented my pictures and told me that he had seen my location, since I would usually put my location whenever I post my pictures, and my bio mentioned that I lived in Island Bridge and Parkgate Place apartments. He told me that he lived in Bellevue, which was about 18 minutes walk and 4 minutes drive away. We continued chatting. He was actually a very fun person. So as we were in the same town, he asked to meet up with me at least. A few days later, we met at Rai's Chinese takeaway restaurant that had recently opened around the corner. When we met, he was actually finer than in the pictures. Not to say he was ugly in the pictures or something. He was handsome, very handsome, but seeing him live. We were already friends. He was a good listener and a very good advisor to have. He was a very fun person to be around with. Our energies clicked, We got along very well. But there was one thing that I had noticed about him was that he had a very short temper, and you had to be careful of what you say to him, even if it's a joke. And another thing, it was like he had some kind of trust issues. He was not a very trusting person. I once asked him about his trust issues and temper. He told me his story about his ex-girlfriend who had made him take responsibility of a child that was not his, and the story about his parents, that his mother was not faithful to his father, and a lot would happen in the house, which somehow led to violence in front of him. That was when he had developed trust issues and a very short temper. When he told me his story, I couldn't believe it, and I promised to be there for him no matter what, and that I would never betray him, at least not intentionally. A month later, he confessed his feelings for me. Well, I had also developed some feelings for him. He was what my soul needed, The chemistry and the spark was there, so the relationship was formed. He would tell me that he loved me every single minute he got, and would make me promise that I would never betray him. From there, I knew that my baby needed help. Maybe some therapy would help him. So I tried talking to him about seeking help, but he bluntly refused and told me that he would never speak to a person he doesn't know about his problems. Men and their egos sometimes, so I just let him be. We worked so hard to fix the issues that he had, but eventually we conquered it all. I was grateful for the fact that he had allowed me to help him get through everything and somehow be able to forgive and move on. So after like a year later, we got married, and it was the best day of our lives. Since we both had no parents or any relatives of some sort, we celebrated our big day with friends and colleagues. Well, I grew up in a foster home, so I don't really know if my parents are still alive or not, and it always saddens me that I had grown up in a foster home without any trace or names of my parents. It's like they had never existed, But life has to move on, right? And besides, we can't always worry ourselves about people who never bothered to look for us, who actually forgot that they had or have children. Anyway, enough about my somber and boring story. So after Frank and I got married, he was a changed man. He was ready to be a family man, His tempers had gone down, and I was very much happy with the changes. Our house was full of happiness and love. Even our intimate moments were on another level. I was a happy woman. I lacked nothing. From love, happiness, handsome husband, beautiful home, and everything, but I don't really know what had come over me to destroy all of that good thing. So I had a male best friend that I had actually taken as my brother. Kristen and I were in a foster home together. By grace and his luck, he was adopted by some rich parents, but later reunited with his father. So life was fortunate for me, and that was how we lost each other. But later reunited when we were both in university, I was so happy to get a chance to be united with Kristen again. Since then, we became inseparable. Frank, my husband, had his own doubts about my friendship with Kristen, but I would always assure him that there was nothing more that was going on between us. It was just a purely brother and sister relationship. Not knowing that I was just fooling my mind and Frank's mind, Kristen actually had his own thoughts about our friendship relationship. And it didn't end very well because I betrayed one person who was able to accept me into his world and heart and make me his without feeling insecure about it. And what did I do to appreciate that? I acted like a loose witch. I hate myself sometimes for what I did. I regret it. After a year of being married to Frank, we started talking about having kids. Well, it was also my dream to have kids with Frank. But I first wanted to boost my modeling career, so I asked if we would wait a little because at that time I had entered for Miss Ireland competition. He had his career and life all figured out. And I also wanted that, He had already had a legacy, an inheritance, but I didn't. And when I told him my reason to that, he got angry, of which confused me because despite that, he wanted to start a family. And I wanted that too, but he didn't understand my reasons of wanting to wait maybe another year of starting a family. And I didn't understand why. I mean, what was the rush? It wasn't like I would be in the competition forever, That modeling competition news was not sitting well with him. I don't know if it was maybe because I was working with Kristen most of the time since he was a photographer, so he was the one who would usually take pictures of me. I tried reasoning with him that modeling was what I love. It had started as more of a hobby, and I started loving it to a point that I had even thought of pursuing a career in the industry. Yes, I was working as a receptionist in one of the law firms in Dublin, name withheld due to personal reasons, but it wasn't something I had dreams to be in. So Frank became distant and would sometimes not come back home. I didn't know if the reason why his behavior had changed towards me was because of me wanting to pursue my modeling career, or because he had his own things that he was not telling. But I had put that aside because I trusted my husband, and I knew that he wouldn't do me dirty or do something that would destroy and jeopardize what we were trying to build. He loved me too much to put our relationship in jeopardy. But instead, I was the one who had put our relationship and marriage in the state where it is now. I wonder what really came over me. One sunny weekend, Frank came back home in the afternoon. Mind you, he had been gone for 3 days without even bothering to call me. I asked where he was coming from. The answer I got was, "I am trying to pursue my career also, since you don't want us to start a family." That response shook me because I didn't expect it from him. He was slowly going back to being his old short-tempered self. I wondered what had driven him back to that state that we had worked so hard to conquer, but I just let it slide and hoped that he would tell me when he was ready. During that time when my husband was busy acting up, I started spending more time with Kristen. Well, Kristen was what I can call a great time passer. He helped me pass time when my husband was super distant from me and our marriage. I was going through a lot, you know. I knew my husband loved me, but his behavior was stressing me out, to a point that I would even find myself venting in Kristen. I know it was wrong of me to just put my marital problems out there or share them with a friend or an outsider, but I needed someone to vent to, and Kristen was there and available. Time passed. I continued spending more time with Kristen, up until Frank saw that I was no longer staying at home for long. He figured that I was spending time with Kristen, so he asked why I was spending more time with Kristen. And the stupid Casey myself lied and told him that Kristen and I were preparing for the Miss Ireland competition, so that was why I had been with Kristen most of the time as my photographer, of course. I knew he didn't believe me, but there was no evidence that showed that there was something going on between Kristen and I. But I knew that there was actually something going on between Kristen and I. I just couldn't tell my insecure and short-tempered husband that during the time when he was an absent husband to me. I had found solace in Kristen because he was there to listen to my venting sessions, and he was what I can call a shoulder to cry on. So, as I was busy venting on Kristen, I didn't know that he had his own agenda. He actually pretended to be my brother, my best friend, and my shoulder to cry on. Weeks later, as my husband was busy pulling his stunts, Kristen and I kissed. I managed to break it at first and reminded him that I was a married woman and I shouldn't have done what I did. Instead of respecting my decisions, the guy just poured his heart to me, telling me how much he had thought him and I would actually end up together, married and having kids. His confession confused the tea out of me, because I had thought our relationship was of a brother and I, but he actually saw a life partner to me. I mean, he had all the time in the world to tell me that when I was single and available. So why would he confess when I was married and during the time when my marriage was going through a patch? After that, I couldn't face him for like a week. Then he came back. Well, he came to my house. He actually came to apologize and blamed his confession to the alcohol that we were drinking that day. As a person that I had thought was my best friend, my brother, I forgave him and gave him another chance to continue where we had left off. Not knowing that the vulture was actually back for me, I don't know how and what I can call it, but he actually destroyed my marriage. And another thing, Frank had told me several times to stay away from Kristen because he had started acting like an obsessed person, but I didn't listen. But instead I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought that my husband was looking at things out of proportion. I thought he was exaggerating, you know. I knew that he didn't like my friendship relationship with Kristen from the day I introduced them to each other, and I used that to close Frank's judgments towards Kristen. So one day my husband and I had a very heated argument about the fact that I wanted to wait for a year to start a family or have kids. That day he lashed out on me to a point that he even told me that he had thought I was different from his ex-girlfriend, and he had thought I knew what I wanted when I first got into relationship with him and agreed to marry him. He even asked if I was cheating on him with Kristen since I was always with him. After that heated argument, he went out to only God knows where. I was so heartbroken by what he said. His words were stuck in my head to a point that I found myself calling Kristen and asked to spend the night with him, as friends of course, of which he agreed. I was in mixed emotions. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know. My other side was angry at Frank for comparing me with his ex, and his words were like a deep stab in my heart. I was also frustrated at the fact that he didn't understand my reasons for why I wanted to pursue my career first before having any children. So that night, as I went to Kristen's flat, he automatically knew what I had needed, and that was alcohol. We drank. I wanted to numb the pain I was feeling inside my heart and forget everything that Frank had said earlier on, so drinking like a fish was the only option I had. Kristen decided to offer me a weed joint that we smoked together, and it did make a trick because most of the things I did or said there I don't really remember. So we smoked and drank. I was having the best time of my life with my ex-male best friend. As we were having fun, I felt a sense of peace and belonging, and one thing led to another. I remember kissing Kristen. The music he was playing made me miss the intimate sessions I would have with my husband, which somehow changed from fire to ice. Ever since he wanted to start expanding the family and I didn't agree, his intimacy game dropped to the ground, and I was suffering. You know, the weed was in my head, the alcohol fully in my system, as we were kissing with Kristen. Things got heated to a point that clothes started flying and we couldn't hold ourselves, so we did the deed. The next morning came and regret came crashing over me. I realized what I had done and left Kristen's house like I was chased by dogs. I was scared that Frank would find out, and what I did somehow made me think that what he said when he compared me to his ex-girlfriend was somehow true, and it did eat me up. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wished to just go to the ocean or to the river Liffey so I can wash away the sin that I had committed. I realized that I had put my marriage in jeopardy, all because I couldn't give my husband what he wanted and ended up finding solace to drugs that led me to be unfaithful to my husband. Days later, Frank had been home, and he apologized for how had behaved and told me that he didn't mean to compare me to his ex. But he was under pressure because he really wanted to have children and build his own family since he doesn't have one. I understood his reasoning, but the guilt was there, you know. I mean, how you tell your husband that you have cheated. And I prayed that Kristen doesn't say anything or do anything stupid that would make Frank find out about my abomination and shame that I had done. Little did I know that the bastard had captured every moment of that night. So about a week later, I received mail, which was very odd because all communications are done technologically nowadays, so I took the mail, wanting to find out what it was. Maybe it would have been my parents finally reaching out, not knowing that it was a very big and destructive bomb. As I opened the mail, I found the letter written, "The night I would never forget, I hope we do it again soon." And it was from Kristen. I got the shock of my life as to why would Kristen do this to me. My heart was beating too fast, thoughts running through my head. I was asking myself, what if Frank was the one who got the mail, and he saw the pictures and a letter that Kristen had sent? I sent Kristen a text right away and broke everything off with him. I wanted nothing to do with him because he had started acting like a psycho. As I was busy, lost in my thoughts, I heard the car door opening and I knew that it was Frank. So I took the mail along with everything that Kristen had put in the mail and threw it in a trash can. When Frank came in, he found me drinking wine like I was drinking water, and he knew that if I drank wine like that, I would either be under pressure or something was bothering me. And that time, I had forgotten that it was the day that Frank would take out trash. I was in so much stress. I told Frank that it was nothing to worry about, and I left him there in the kitchen and went to the bedroom. My mind came back later that it was the day that Frank had to take out the trash. I rushed to the kitchen and found out that the trash can was empty. I looked for Frank and found him in the sitting room, looking at the pictures that Kristen had sent, and the letter was beside him. I knew there and then that I was in deep shit. I knew that my marriage was over. Frank couldn't even look me in the eyes. He was furious, and I knew what was going to come next when he was like that. His eyes were full of rage, hatred, and hurt. I had hurt my husband and destroyed my marriage in the most humiliating way. I hated myself and still do hate myself for that. But I had to try and explain why I had done what I did and apologize, right? So the next day, when I had seen that he was no longer enraged like he was the previous night, I asked to speak to him. I was glad that as much as his tempers kept coming back, but he was not violent, well, at least towards me. So I explained everything to him from point A to point Z. I tried making him understand that I didn't do what I did on purpose, and it wasn't my intention to destroy what we had. Instead of listening to me, he went to our bedroom and took out all my clothes. I knew the words he wanted to say already, So I decided to not fight him, but apologize and give him some space, with the hope that he would calm down and let us fix things. I mean, we were both wrong. Yes, he didn't cheat on me. Or at least I didn't know or had the evidence that he was really not cheating on me. But we were both wrong, and we had to come to terms with our mistakes and fix them like a married couple, you know? I love my husband a lot, and being away from him made me realize how naive and careless I was to do what I did to him. About 2 months later, Frank came to my apartment and asked that we could talk, so I agreed. Both of us confessed everything. Well, more like I confessed everything that I was doing with Kristen. He also confessed that he had been staying at his apartment because he wanted to be away from me. He confessed that his actions were selfish, but what he had discovered about me really broke him. We said a lot to each other, and he listened attentively. I think he understood the damage his mistrust had caused, the pain he had inflicted upon me. As I was torn between the love I felt and the betrayal I had endured, I decided to give Frank a chance. I mean, I was the one who made the big mistake here, so it was only fair to stay and fix our relationship. I recognized that his suspicions had stemmed from his own insecurities and fears, rather than any wrongdoing on my part. I agreed to work on rebuilding our relationship, but only if we both committed to healing and regaining the trust we had lost. With the help of a couples therapist, we embarked on a journey of self-reflection and open communication. We learned to address our insecurities, to listen to one another's fears, and to rebuild the foundation of trust that had crumbled. Our love began to heal, but scars remained. Frank is now acutely aware of the cost of suspicion and mistrust. He vowed to be more understanding and open in our relationship. While I am still carrying the pain of the accusations and betrayal I had done, I chose to forgive, recognizing that rebuilding trust would take time and effort from both of us. We learned that love requires vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to confront one's own fears and insecurities. We sought a new beginning. My husband and I love each other so much, and I believe that we will heal and be able to move on from everything. I don't know how to be free again without making my husband suspect that I would be doing something to destroy our marriage again. Please help me with advice and tips. No judgments, please.